do our intro.
Of course, I always forget to open up the Twitch. Oh, crap. Did anybody edit the Twitch info?
I did.
Oh, thank you, Matthew.
Wow, man.
All
Thank you.
good.
Thank you, Matthew. I totally forgot.
Amazing. Dylan.
Well, that's just the
Fuck
kind
up.
of preparation we have here at Neophyte.
Well, when one person falters, another one picks up the slack. That's how
That's
it
right.
works.
Exactly.
We're
Exactly.
a team.
We're all carrying each other.
Yeah.
When there was only a single pair of footprints, that was when I was carrying you.
Indeed.
So, hello.
Hello.
We're Neophyte Studios. We've got like the whole crew here today, which is awesome. We're playing Mass Effect 2. Everyone here is a writer. You know the spiel by now. I am rolling through the intro. And who here has played the Mass Effect series? Not even two, just like any amount of experience.
I have zero Mass Effect experience.
Okay.
I've played them all.
Same.
Okay. And Cleveland?
Yeah, I've not played it, but I've seen gameplay of it.
Good deal. Okay, this is excellent. So I just tore through Mass Effect 1. We're getting started with Mass Effect 2. And I've got some questions. I want to kind of like push our conversation. There's been a lot of talk about Mass Effect's narrative and its like aspects as a role-playing game over the years. It's like one of the most analyzed games for those terms, and I want to turn to some slightly different directions. I want to use this as an opportunity to talk to other actual writers and not just games people.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to lower my game volume because, wow, that explosion is loud. Okay. So, if everyone's familiar or not familiar, Mass Effect works on a morality system, a really straightforward binary morality system, the Paragon Renegade system. And on the one end, Paragon is supposed to be more heroic. Renegade is not like explicitly villainous, but it's more aggressive, more self-serving, more like to the point. But
It,
we,
uh,
yeah,
it's a more applied version. Have you ever played Jade Empire?
right.
It's a more reasonable. It's what they wanted to do with the morality system in Jade Empire.
Yeah.
But
Right, absolutely. And so they finally got their opportunity with Mass Effect, and it's been criticized like to hell and back that a lot of the
An interactive comic. Wow.
yeah, catching you up. A lot of this
That's a
stuff
great way to catch us up. Like
Yeah,
that's
right.
it is.
because one of the things I want to talk about today is the
Yeah.
difficulty of sequels, right, and
Mm.
Oh yeah.
series, and how hard serial storytelling is.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
there's plenty to talk about. I mean, this is an actual game trilogy that carries your save from one game to the other, tracking all of your choices in the same way that like Disco Elysium does.
Really?
Um,
Okay, that's really
And the
cool.
first game was released in 2007, so that means it was being in production since like 2004. It's incredibly ambitious. So, like, the Paragon Renegade system, a lot of people have said it hasn't aged very well, especially across the rest of the series. And so, two of the main themes of the game are humanity's place in a galactic community and organic versus synthetic life. Those are the two big like themes that are the focus of Mass Effect 1. And so often what I found was that the Paragon and the Renegade system, Paragon would be more like globalist or like for the galaxy. You'd be siding with other aliens, you'd be bringing people together versus like the Renegade would you would often resolve situations by putting Earth or humans first. You could undermine other organizations, and like one of the final choices of the game is to save like this galactic council, right? The council of all the huge races. You can either let them die as the Renegade, and then humanity would supplant themselves and become the full council, or you could save them. I mean, and so a lot of these choices end up really being aggressive to the point where most people are not making the renegade choice because you're thinking about the cost of life instead of just getting your goal in an aggressive way. So I want to talk to you guys. Something like Disco Elysium, what are, like, if we're talking about a morality system or other morality systems in games, or like if you're going to make a D&D campaign, you have to make a moral decision to have someone let a group of people die or not, right? How would you go about doing that? Because I think the Paragon Renegade system was impressive for the time, but it's so restrictive and not and a lot. This is kind of generally the fan consensus that it doesn't consistently follow something heroic or villainous. That it's a little all over the place.
Yeah, I think probably before we actually even talk about that, though, we need to have like a more granular discussion about what exactly the Paragon Renegade is, because Pinckney and Sarah haven't played it. So, like, the Paragon Renegade, just as a quick kind of crash course on it, is that you essentially have a good choice and a bad choice. Well, not a bad choice, but just a more, like Matt was saying, an aggressive choice. And
Yeah.
so and it happens in any given situation. So like in a bar, you could meet like a bartender and they're kind of an asshole to you, and you can say, you can choose blue, which is Paragon, and it's like, I forgive you for, dumping a drink on me. And then you could do Renegade, which is red, and you can
Yeah,
slug them
this
for it.
is not a discussion I need to have
Yeah.
because I'm already, I mean, 100% renegade. Like I never,
Well,
when you
yeah,
say to
without a
me
doubt.
Paragon or Renegade, I'm like, you don't even describe anything to me. You don't need to go any further. I'm definitely killing the Galactic Council.
Right.
I'm definitely promoting my own interests and the interests of my species.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely beating the shit out of that clumsy fucking bartender.
Which is
So I don't.
exactly why I didn't
Right.
want
I
to
don't.
play the end of Mass Effect 1 with you, because we know how that's going to go.
You're
Yeah.
gonna be
No.
a big racist.
Well, yeah. I mean, speciesist or something. But I mean, but I'm the guy who I can't stand the new Planet of the Apes uh, movies because they're on the side of the apes, and I'm like, I don't care. Like I'm not an ape. I'm not on the side of the apes.
Right. I'm
And they
team
didn't. Yeah,
people.
yeah. Like I'm like, yeah. Woody Harrelson's an asshole, but he's at least. I mean, I guess I couldn't actually mate with him, but there's sort of a theoretical that your avatar is so expressive, Sarah. I mean, it looks, except for the smile, it looks like you. But
Pretty much, yeah.
it's I mean, it really does communicate your disdain for my Woody Harrelson thing.
Your
but
Woody Harrelson fetish.
Well, who doesn't? I mean, come on, Woody Harrelson.
True.
Yeah. So that's I never have that question.
Yeah.
I am team people.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I would, that would be what I would predict. I mean, just in the same way that I feel like Matt and I could predict everything you were going to choose in Disco. So it makes.
It's a little disappointing that I'm that predictable, but there's nothing I can do about it.
I mean, at least your
Just shake
predictability
it
is
up a
exciting.
bit.
Your predictability is exciting, though. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
How would you go about making a better system, right? Because as we're immediately finding out, right, it's not the most like robust way to try and separate players, right? People are either with or against Pinckney pretty explicitly.
I have two things to say, both on this topic. One, it's still better than their first morality. Well, not necessarily their first because they had Neverwinter Nights and such, but it's still better than the morality system in Jade Empire, where at the beginning it gave the idea that open palm was sort of good, and then closed fist could be good, but in actuality it never panned out that way in the game. If you chose closed option, you were just always kind of a dick. And if you chose open palm, you're always good. But it's still as limited as that, just in a different way. But also, it's also somewhat better than like Dungeons and Dragons in a way, because the one thing I hate about Dungeons and Dragons is, yes, evil and good are like quantifiable things in that universe, but the nine alignment boxes don't take into account human actions. Like my lawful good paladin would turn from smiting like a pedophile priest because, oh, you're not supposed to, then then that should not, then but but you want to do that, then you should not be boxed in by the alignment system of D&D, even though good and evil are quantifiable things. It doesn't give
Yeah.
any ability for lawful good to become authoritarian. They're
Mhm.
always, lawful good. You've purged all evil, so you're locking down things to prevent more evil, leaving no options. It's just a frustrating system, I've always
And so
found.
that makes sense why, like, with Mass Effect, you're playing a character, right? The story points are going to end you to a singular destination. And, like, Disco Elysium is ambitious because that singular destination is not the point, right? Your game can end wherever you fail. And that can feel organic and sincere because of how open-ended
Still
it is.
satisfying, right? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
the time we couldn't talk that big fat guy into doing what we wanted, and the game ended, like that was okay with me. I was just like,
Yeah.
well, that felt like an ending.
Right.
It wasn't the ending,
Hmm.
but what is the ending anyway, right? I mean, that's the every story has an unhappy ending if you hang on long enough.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's every fairy tale ends with the death of both of the lovers,
Right.
Hmm.
right? If
Yeah.
if you just stick around.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. In some
so,
ways, getting those endings cut short is actually valuable, and
well, every
interesting.
ending is cut short, right? I mean,
Yeah.
except for in Sarah's uh, 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 10 generation Sims epic, where it'll just go on, and we'll wish for them all to die, and for us to die, and for the sun to die.
Yeah, one
Uh,
day I'll just murder them.
See, that
Well,
would be
isn't that how
great.
every Sims game
It's
goes?
great. But
Sometimes, yeah.
but
So,
I
With
would like.
psychological 1970s psychologist type mind experiments that are just inhumane.
have you been watching me play?
No, I just know that's how, like, I play, how most guys play Sims, and I assume women do it too.
What would
So
happen if I
Sometimes.
this family, they just love having fireworks in the house. They just love it.
Put a fireplace in every room.
I once built an annex to a house and then put a fridge and a desk and a bed in there just because one of my students would not study. One of my teenagers would not study, and I wanted him to study. And I locked him in this room until he studied.
Yeah. And
Nice.
there's my parenting style. You know a lot now
Yeah.
about how my children were raised. Well, then I'd love to see like a rationalization system,
Right.
right? Because that's actually how we accommodate good and evil as humans, right? Is anything I do, I have reasons to do and reasons to believe it's good.
Okay.
And anything you do that is counter to what I would desire you to do, I can rationalize as having been bad and wicked,
Right.
Okay.
right? And so, but that's not a dynamic that you see in games. But that you can see, there is literature that does that, right? There's literature that and movies. You take a movie like Nightcrawler, right? Have you all seen that
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
with
Mm-hmm.
Jake Gyllenhaal?
Ugh.
A brilliant movie about an evil person who, or someone I would say is evil,
Yeah.
who would not himself say he's evil at all. Like he understands why he's doing what he's doing. It makes good sense to him. He understands why he involves other people in it.
Hmm.
Or a book like Child of God or Paris Trout, right, where the protagonists are I mean, the one guy's necrophiliac, near murderer, the other guy's a racist murderer, and yet the book doesn't present them as evil. right?
Right.
We interpret them that way because we see what they do, but they themselves have no sense of themselves. They would say in D&D alignment,
Yeah.
that they were, maybe chaotic good,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to.
Like, is anybody here? Would anybody
Yeah.
here just say, "Oh, I'm definitely chaotic evil"? Like, I mean, except
Right.
Sarah. Um, I mean,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
the issue with D&D is that in that setting, good and evil are actual quantifiable stats because there are spells to identify, oh, this thing is good, this thing is evil, and that's the issue I have with D&D.
Yeah.
yeah, and you're just never like, if you give me, choices, whatever choice I make, I will not rationalize it as having been an evil choice.
Right.
I might have been the best of bad choices, say, or you know, or like, oh well, I'm sure Jesus will let me go on this one or
Yeah.
whatever. But I am totally capable, as is everyone, right, of rationalizing. But I'm also, I mean, any wicked thing I'm capable of, however wicked it might be, I'm equally capable of something magnificent and heroic,
Yeah. Right.
right? And again, that's the problem with that quantifiable thing, is that I'm all of those things all at once,
Right.
right? I am
Yeah.
evil and I'm virtuous,
Yeah.
and I'll do both of those things, within 10 minutes of each other. I will be a complete shitheel, and then I will be a self-sacrificing saint,
Right.
and
Contain
and so
multitudes.
right, I do. I am large.
Yeah. I mean, I
That's what I'm
think
wearing.
Pinckney's kind of nailing it in my opinion. Like because I've talked about this before on the stream, but in the original Fallout games, like Fallout 1 and 2,
Yeah.
the what they do. Well, let me start over. So I think the greatest sin that Mass Effect ever made, and this goes for like almost every RPG, is that when you put blue and red next to words, you
Yep.
are going to inform the player what they're doing, right? And they won't even come up with a justifiable. They won't rationalize their decisions, right? That's the problem. When they see blue, they go, "Oh, blue's good. I pick blue," or red is strong. I pick strong renegade, and rather than just kind of letting the writing do it. And so like with Fallout, the original Fallouts, there was no blue and red. It was just dialogue choices. And you had to be
Which
really
is
careful.
weird
What?
because Jade Empire, their previous game before Mass Effect, also didn't do red and blue for open fist and closed palm. I mean, if you chose something, you would see it go with a plus sign, with a blue plus sign or a red minus sign, but it didn't say when you made the decision which one was which. You just had to be like, I it. And you could tell from dialogue, I'm going to kill you and steal your cow, or would you like me to help you cross this ford this river? But
I like, I'm gonna kill you and your cow. That's way worse. You're like, okay, me, that's fine, but my cow?
Yeah.
That's just going
And
too
so
far.
Mass Effect's, I mean, literal UI, usually on the top of the dialogue wheel will be Paragon choices, and on the bottom will be Renegade choices, almost consistently.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's also that the dialogue, the spoken dialogue, and the text you read before you select the option don't line up. Um, but I kind of want to get back to what Pinckney was talking about, the like rationalization, and like I want to hypothesize how we would gamify that, if
Well,
that makes sense.
See, I think that's a great question. I'd like to know, and then I'd like to do it.
right.
Yeah,
Well, I think that some of it has already been kind of done. Like I do think that, like I was saying with Fallout, you're not
haha,
given,
you died.
you're not given a, you're not given an answer, right? Like this is the thing that drives me crazy about RPGs in general, is that dialogue is a multiple choice test. And I hate that. I hate it. It's stupid. There is no right answer. And so like when you look at a game like Fallout or Planescape Torment or even Disco, what you're looking at is dialogue choices that you have to read and consider your choice and live with that choice, right? Like
right,
that's how you rationalize. Um,
right.
or you could do something, not to brag, but you could do something like dialogue bullets with my game Disc Jockey, where like you have to spend resources based on like how many dialogue points you have, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you have to take it away from the multiple choice test.
Well, and with disc jockey, you're still playing a specific character,
Right.
right? Just like Mass Effect.
Right.
Um, but instead of all options aggressive or, kind, being the same character, so we have to flavor it like it's that character's personality. Your character has an explicit personality, and when you do something that breaks it, even if it's for the greater good, it takes a resource away, which I think is a much more interesting system to play under.
Right.
Because with Mass Effect, your choices matter. That was the whole big thing. That something you do in the first game, letting someone live or die, has ramifications later down the line in the trilogy.
Yeah. Right.
But that's it. And that typically, at least in my experience of replaying Mass Effect 1 just now and looking to play the rest of this series, I'm just sitting there metagaming instead of role playing,
Yeah.
which is
Hold on,
not
I'll
the
be right
purpose of
back.
the series.
Yeah, replayability is like the curse of games, I think. I
Mm,
mean, if you think I'm going to go back and play Mass Effect again, you're fucking crazy.
mm.
I'm never playing it again. Never. I already played it.
Well, and I was looking into so Mass Effect 1 has like 6 credited writers. And I was looking with an interview of one of them. I have it pulled up here. They were talking about how Renegade doesn't feel great. And he's like, "Yeah, I didn't really like going back and replaying the older games because it was, it was rough, it was rigid." But he said later they added the option for the interrupt system, which started with this game. We might get one of those options where you can select a button to take an action instead of just Renegade or Paragon in conversation. So if you're interrogating someone, you can take the option of kicking them out the window if you're just sick of it. If somebody you're trying to talk them down from killing themselves because you need them for something, you can push ahead with the Paragon and do something more kind to save them.
hmm
And it has a dramatic effect on your character's ability to later do kind or evil things. And I don't necessarily think that's an improvement because it's rewarding you for playing consistently. It's not letting you encounter each scenario organically.
hmm Yeah. I don't know. I think I'd like to hear what Pingy and Sarah have to say about this
You know?
in terms of.
Well, I'm
Well,
interested in Sarah's experience, like with The Sims and the sorts of things she enjoys and how you make choices.
Yeah.
well, it's funny that you mentioned that because in Sims 4, in the specific game pack that lets you have like clubs and stuff, there are two clubs called Paragons, like one's Paragons and one's Renegades.
Oh,
Like
really?
that, yeah. And so there are like different choices in like club gatherings that are good and bad, and like good ones will win you points, and bad ones will make you lose points, and you can get kicked out of the club. Um,
Hmm.
I
Interesting.
wouldn't call them like the Paragons and Renegades in The Sims. I wouldn't call them like good and bad. Like they just hate each other.
Yeah.
So I always have the leader of each club. Like I have those two hook up with each other.
Excellent.
And then they both get
You
kicked
wrote,
out.
you wrote a story about that.
I
What's
did?
what is yeah about the you remember the two sororities?
Oh, true.
Was it These Violent Delights?
Yeah, it
Was that
was.
the title of the story? And
Yeah.
they were the sort of the leaders of the sororities, and they went and they kind of had a rumble.
I guess I just find that dynamically extremely sexy.
Yeah, well, and that was in the two women who ran the sororities were sort of secretly or not so secretly in love, and but of course they were also dire enemies, and
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's funny. So you actually put that dynamic in your literature.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
And I
interesting.
like the idea that like the people who are supposed to be like the good ones, like that's just what they think. Like we were saying
Mhm.
earlier.
Right,
Like
right.
there's no proof of that. And in fact,
Well,
they're kind of the opposite.
there's I did that piece, that audio piece, Voices of the Condemned, right? Going
Hmm.
Home, which was it's music, it's a musical piece, and it's also a bunch of audio. And we decided the last quote we were going to use before it is finished, which was which is the very end, was the quote, and it's a little girl who reads it, and she reads it so deliberately, and she's like, good people are always so sure they're right. And I just thought of course that's correct, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's just such an accurate reading of human nature. Good people are always so sure they're right, and as Sarah implies, in fact, that's what separates them from actually good people,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Is that if you're sure you're right, then the next thing you know, you're shoving Jews into ovens.
Right. No, I think that's
You know,
actually that's an excellent point. I think that this kind of we're circling around the idea of like removing the all good or all renegade dialogue option and doing something where like it would be very interesting if in Mass Effect you were given a paragon choice of sacrificing this species of dogs you found on a planet. And it's like, well, if I don't, cull this entire herd, then the planet, they might have to get a different food source. So it's not
They're
even
an
like,
invasive species.
yeah, right. It's
Well,
just,
and that specific choice does come up in Mass Effect when you encounter a race you thought to be extinct called the Rachni. They're like bug monsters, right? And
I've seen enough
you
Starship Troopers to know that they should be
it's
extinct.
the right. It's the same it's the same dynamic though, and so you can make the choice to let the queen go to protect her species, and she promises, I'll stay on a planet. I'll teach my people the error of our ways. We want to survive. Or you can kill them and say it's too risky to have this creature that
and then
just
you become the speaker
populates
for the
like
dead,
crazy.
and no one likes you
And
anymore.
the only like effects that has later, if you let them go immediately, someone's like, maybe that was a bad decision. If you kill them, no one really cares because they're perceived as evil. And then later in Mass Effect 3, when you need to defend the galaxy, they are either a point that's there or not.
right. So, but question about that is the renegade
Yeah,
choice to kill them?
the renegade choice is to kill them.
Yeah. So
Yes.
what I'm saying is the paragon
Yeah.
choice should be to kill them, because that's the
Right.
thing that is annoying me about this type of game is that
Right.
it goes back to what Pinckney's saying, like, and what Pinckney and Sarah are both saying about this whole morality, this sense of quantifiable morality, which makes it so that no matter what you do, you're being Jesus as you walk through this game, and it's just like
I
I
mean,
would,
I think the issue with that is considering people on the internet. Do you know how much controversy they would court if someone was like, "This game supports genocide,
right,
is the good
Well, yeah,
option."
I think that's. I mean, one of the. Maybe this is what gets Neophyte Studios shut down, but I mean, I remember in the '90s, a game came out that was a school shooter game,
yeah,
right? And there was great outrage, and of course, that's why the game was produced, which is a problem,
sure,
right? It was not produced out of a sincere desire, at least in my interpretation, a
sure,
sincere desire to embody what we think of as inhuman in order to understand that it's actually fully human,
Yeah.
right? In the way that one of our society's problems is, I think, that we like to think, oh, Hitler was like an alien,
yeah,
Right.
right? And the
I heard
Nazis.
something.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I heard. Funny you say that. I read something someone said yesterday that. I mean, and Gandhi is not the best example to use for this because he was apparently kind of horrible too. But Hitler and Gandhi were both human, but or Hitler was as human as Gandhi, but not as humane.
right,
Mm.
Yeah. Well,
So
not even nearly like the opposite,
yeah,
but it's worthwhile to know that, I mean, we're both Gandhi and Hitler, right? We embody all of those, but we don't admit to large swaths of our actual natures, and things that are suppressed come out in really bizarre and terrifying ways,
yeah,
right? It's why prohibitions don't work. It's why political correctness doesn't work, right? Is that forcing stuff underground just results in a lot of problems. You may kick the can down the road, but you're still eventually going to have to deal with that thing, and it's going to become more energetic when you put it under pressure.
Right.
And so
So
games are infantile when they don't acknowledge the
I
full
agree,
scope of what
and
it means to be
and
human.
this is I think the great gap. One of the reasons I'm really glad to have this conversation is
Mm,
this is the gap between even a very good game
mhm.
and like real literature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that literature will deal with our actual humanity,
Yeah.
right? And I have yet really to run across a game that wasn't an or even an exploitation game, right? That dealt with the dual, right, with the Jungian duality of human nature.
Yeah.
And I want games to be more Jungian, right? That's so that they can
Just
start
play the Persona
participating.
series.
I was just gonna say.
I mean, I would be happy to. But it's in order to start participating in the great narrative about what people actually are, right?
Yeah.
Which poetry does. I mean, not all poetry, but poetry throughout the ages, right? That's what it has discussed. Legends, myths, novels, and I want games to be doing the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, I want to play a game that's as risky to me morally, right? That actually poses moral hazard
Right.
in the way that something like Child of God did,
Yeah.
right? Where I'm like, how can I love Ballard? Like, and I know you all know the same Ballard I do.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the one in the book, not because there's no way anyone loves the actual
Yeah. You
person
can't.
Ballard,
He's
the
unlovable.
actual Neophyte Network Studios Network person. That
So we
outside of
just
my.
in Mass
Wait,
Effect 2, as I'm playing here, we just got our mission, which is kind of a
okay.
development along with what we're saying. So, right, my big critique of the Paragon Renegade was either a globalist perspective or an Earth first perspective. You died in the beginning of Mass Effect 2, and you've been revived by a company called Cerberus. Cerberus is a splinter cell, or a splinter, an organization that is splintered off the main human government that believes in Earth first human protection. Their number one goal is to pursue humans' interest in the galaxy. So they spent all this money bringing you, the hero, back so that you can fight the existential threat that's attacking the galaxy. So now, as you go through the game, you're locked with that mission. You can choose how much or how little you want to ally yourself with Cerberus, and Paragon versus Renegade becomes what I feel like it was meant to do, which is how you're going to pursue your goal. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're on this mission. You, even though you happen to align with Cerberus's interests, whether or not you agree with them is irrelevant. And so that leads for more role playing dynamics with choices that don't impact the main narrative, where before the main narrative was hinged on Paragon and Renegade.
Yeah.
I immediately see that as an improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we're like humans are malleable enough. I mean, we can read books, which is where we have very little choice in that type of game. You know what I mean? So we're malleable enough to fall into a narrative and watch the moral dilemmas come up and play out in a print narrative. And
Mm.
so I don't think it's necessarily I think it's actually a strength if you're going to have somebody play as a single character. You just have to be really smart with how you set up their situation because we can role play in any situation. That's fine. It's just you have to actually write it well enough so that it would make sense for you
Right.
to make bad
Like,
choices.
right, because if in a game you were ever actually going to have a hero's journey, right? The whole like Joseph Campbell 9 yards, then you have to have the refusal of the call.
Yeah.
But the
Right.
refusal of the call in a game, or at least any game I've played or can think of, the
Mm.
refusal of the call would always be false and temporizing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I actually believe when Luke Skywalker says to Obi-Wan Kenobi, "Listen, now it's the harvest season. I've got to go home. Uncle Owen will beat me if I don't." You know what I mean? Like I buy his reasons for the refusal of the call. It's not just. And then when he goes home, like home has been obliterated,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so his reason for then accepting the call is real and also not entirely virtuous, right?
Right.
Like this guy didn't just sign on with Obi-Wan Kenobi. it was like, well, when he got home and his pseudo parents had burned up, then he accepts the call. Well, you got nowhere else to go, right?
Right.
And there are interesting variations on that. I mean, in the Road Warrior, yeah, Max Rockatansky sort of waits too long. He refuses the call and he leaves in his own vehicle and is attacked. And it's actually not a great way they did it, but he's attacked and his car is destroyed, and he ends up being taken back wounded to the people who needed him to drive their truck for them.
Yeah.
Then he accepts the call, and they're like, listen, you didn't really wow us with what you just did. Well, those are convincing, right? But in a game, it tends to be, if there is a refusal of the call, and generally speaking, there is that, right? It tends to be temporizing. You know what I mean? It's just like it's fulfillment of a form, but it's not motivated. Like, I've never played a game where I found myself making a decision and then it just led me into a blind wall, and I realized, oh my god, I've got to, I actually have to do like the thing you're supposed to do. You always know you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
Well,
right?
right,
You
and just
know
here,
you're
I've
supposed
just
to do it
gotten my
all.
mission. There was no refusal of the call. The closest thing was saying, okay, I woke up surrounded by Cerberus tech. You guys revived me. I don't trust this. And they're like, come
Mhm.
on. And you don't really argue with
And
it.
you go, okay, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you go, okay. And just now, with the conversation with the Elusive Man, the bottom choice was, okay, let's get started for the Renegade that you're siding with him. And then you have the middle option of, I guess I don't have a choice. The explicit line was, am I volunteering or am I being volunteered? And the Elusive Man says back just now, you always have a choice, but first go complete this mission for me. You work with these people, they'll brief you, and then you'll have your choices later, which is just saying, it's pointing out the illusion and then telling you that the illusion is still effective when it just isn't.
Yeah.
No, that's right. It's a false choice.
Right.
And it needs to be a real choice in order. I mean, and that's just verisimilitude, right? It doesn't have to be a real choice, but it has to be a convincing choice. I guess it has to be a choice that you believe you are making, not the illusion of a choice. And there's a religious problem. I mean, what we come down to in the end, right, is a religious problem. So games are kind of Calvinist, yeah.
Mhm.
How do you
In that a
mean?
game simply says, you know, predetermined, this is all, it's deterministic. This is all, no matter what choice you make, you're going to end up at this place, right? You're going to end up with, this circumstance, this puzzle to solve, this enemy to kill, right? And it's the question would be how to make a non-Calvinist game, how to make a game that doesn't believe the universe is deterministic, and that's got to be procedural, right?
Yeah. Well, it could be a procedural, but it also could just come out in the writing. Like, I mean, so for example, what you were talking about with the refusal of the call. The refusal of the call is ultimately a humanizing thing in a novel, right? Like
Right,
everybody who's projecting themselves onto a protagonist, they want to change their lives, but they don't want to do the work to change their lives, right?
right,
And so
yep.
they can identify with those who refuse to change their lives. And then the hero, different from our lives, is forced to go on their journey. They
Right, because we go home and Aunt Beru has a womp rat steak on the table, and Uncle Owen is pouring out the blue milk, and we just sit down and go, okay, I'm just going to stay here, right? And the
right.
war goes on without us, and we're just a boring schmuck, on our hydration farm or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's not the refusal of the call. The refusal of the call feels human. The extraordinary part is when we actually find ourselves in a position where we need to accept the call.
Yeah, the point of
That's
no
the thing
return,
that
yeah.
doesn't happen.
Right.
That's the moment when we enter the special world,
Yeah.
right, of the hero's journey. When we enter the world where story happens.
Yeah.
But I think most games don't ever enter the special world, right? They sort of they seem to assume you're in the special world all the time,
Yeah.
and that's okay. There's no transition from ordinary life, like, oh, you're a superhero who gets blown apart fighting the, whoever's, right? And then you're restored by these people, and they want you to do the same thing because you were really good at it before,
Right.
Right.
right? I mean, are there, I'm probably just missing them. I don't, play all that many games that, but, just like I can't read all the books, I can't watch all the movies, but like, are there games where you do just start out as a Mark Hamill, I mean, or as a, Luke Skywalker, weirdo on the planet who's kind of bullied. If you see the outtakes, like he's actually bullied by his friends.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and there's some big dude on his planet on Tatooine who doesn't like him.
Yeah, he's a dork.
Well, I'm kind of
Yeah,
thinking
exactly.
of when we played the beginning of Lisa. That's kind of the closest to really starting with someone who's depowered.
Yeah, no,
and
that's right. At least it
fight
was
all
really
out.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
so maybe
right.
maybe we're talking about only indie games, right? And maybe this is true too of the difference between kind of commercial narrative, Marvel, right? The Marvel universe, and a film like James Gunn's Super,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
Um,
Also,
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
also, Pinckney, you may change your mind on siding with humanity if you ever play Mass Effect when you meet Garrus Vicarian, because he's like alien Kermit.
yeah, he's
Yeah,
awesome.
anybody who's like Kermit, I am.
He's alien Kermit,
Yeah,
so
then
you might
I'm
change your
down.
mind about being humanity first.
Well,
So
and I'm a bear right now, so I'm not really on your side anymore.
quick shout out to the chat. Squishy Buff Dave says, mechanic idea. The first significant moral choice a player makes in a game becomes the refusal of the call. The story becomes about whether or whatever the player was trying to avoid with the choice they made.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean that sounds, and then you have to write that, right?
Right.
I mean that's the problem, of course, is we go, we can propose any mechanic, but then, like the storytelling of whatever sort actually has to support that choice.
Right. Well, I mean, because
I mean,
go ahead.
well, have you all ever seen? Has any of you ever seen the movie, the Rob Zombie movie, The Devil's Rejects?
Yeah.
For
Okay,
there.
I mean, I know a lot of people hate that movie. I think it's brilliant. I think
Yeah.
it's one of the best American films, and the fact that it ends with Freebird, right? This sort of, I mean, it ends with a heroic moment from like a Sam Peckinpah movie from the '70s, where the Firefly family, all the surviving members of the Firefly family.
Take your
I should not do
time.
I should not do drugs before the stream, or I should do different drugs. Are in they're in this huge American convertible driving, into a police cordon, and we know they're about to die, and they're all happy, and they're a loving, family unit, and they seem thrilled with what's happening, and Freebird is playing, and it really is like it's like, oh, this is actual freedom, like they were free to make evil choices,
Yeah.
and evil choice after evil choice that leads them, and yet at the end of that film, you experience it, or at least I experience it as real freedom. Like, oh, that's what actual freedom is.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, you can choose between things that are mediocre and things that are good or whatever, but that you really are free just to kill those people,
Yeah.
and they are horrendous characters, right? They are awful, awful people. They're the worst people ever.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the devil's rejects, right? Like they're the people who are too wicked even for the devil,
Mm.
and yet it's magnificent. Like it's a towering work of art.
It's
And
really good. Yeah.
everything he's done is by comparison so trivial that I don't know, except for the Lords of Salem music video and the song "More Human Than Human," but like I don't know like how they're even by the same person.
Yeah.
But that is a story about real freedom and what it means to recognize that you're free. That it's not freedom if you're allowed just to make a narrow range of choices.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Right. Yeah, I think.
That they always make the most extreme choice, or Sarah, I mean, maybe talk about Beth a little bit, right? Because Beth, in your novel, yeah, Saint Catastrophe, subtitle Shit Show, she's an anti-hero, right? I mean, she's a, she always makes the wrong choice. Like that was, as I recall, a deliberate authorial strategy.
Yeah, in every scene, it was a conscious decision. Okay, what should her goal be? As like what would a rational person do? And then do the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And can you just tell us about a scene? Like, tell us about like in the convenience store, or and this is, by the way, this is the novel Saint Catastrophe by Sarah Gillick. It's out from. Can I do an advertisement? Is that okay?
It's your
Yeah,
stream.
Sure.
that's fine.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
out
gonna do
from.
it, so.
It's out from. You should, but yeah, it's out from SFK Press, October of last year, and it's just a terrific anti-hero. It is the darkest comedy possible, right? I mean, it's very funny novel, but in they're not even shades of gray. Like it is dark. It's as dark as humor gets, but it's hilariously funny. Like she's a slapstick character, and yet but the
Yeah.
stakes tend to be life and death, right? Like I mean, she's slapstick, but when she screws up, people die.
Oh, so it's like
Yeah.
JoJo.
Like what?
Like JoJo's, where they make one screw
Oh
up and
no,
like 5 people die.
yeah, and then the next thing you know in JoJo, like somebody's head is exploding. I'm like, I'm watching a cartoon, and then this guy standing there with his hand blown off, screaming like, "What happened to my hand? Why did my teacup just blow my hand off?" I mean, it's really, and so there are consequences for like poor choices. But can you just describe a scene like where she just makes a terrible decision?
Yeah, so she's high on shrooms and she's being chased by this leader of a biker gang because she stole their drugs. Um, and
So
so
that
she,
right there is just a whole series of bad decisions.
right, so leading up, those are the bad decisions that got her to that spot. And then in the scene, she's at a convenience store because she really wants a cookie. Um, and the leader of the biker gang comes into the convenience store, so she's hiding from him while she's like stoned out of her mind. And she's about to sneak out the back door, like she would have escaped, but she's like, I didn't get my cookie yet.
And so she goes
So
back.
Yeah, she goes
she
back
goes,
and
yeah,
gets the cookie or tries to. And she's
yeah,
clumsy. That's the other thing I love about her is that she's physically clumsy, which we very seldom do with our characters. Right?
Yeah.
We
yeah,
tend our
especially
characters are
early, I
like
think.
they just we're like, oh, he climbed out the window and down the ivy trellis and ran across the lawn, and it's like Beth trips and stumbles and bangs her head, and I mean it's just so human in
Yeah,
that
she
way.
falls on her ass a lot.
It's what Poe called both in his life and his literature the imp of the perverse, right? And Beth is the perfect embodiment of the imp of the perverse. That she is always at the moment of triumph, she snatches victory, she snatches defeat from the jaws of victory, right? That she's overcome by the imp of the perverse.
Hmm.
And I don't recall in games ever encountering the imp of the perverse,
Yeah,
right?
I think
Where I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, what I was going to say in relation to that, and I think that this is kind of the grand problem with games, is that games are so afraid to let you fail. They're so afraid to let you fail because they want to, curtail frustration. They don't want you to stop playing because you're failing. So, and this is something that Tynan Sylvester talked about quite a bit in RimWorld, is that he wanted players to fail in their stories of games, but he developed a system which is called elastic failure, where
Yeah.
failure is very elastic and it's not a game over screen. It's a what are you going to do now that you're in a failure state screen, right? So like in Sarah's book, her having escaped without her cookie is a failure state, and she's like, oh shit, I'm in an elastic failure state, I can go back to try and get that cookie. And games do not let you do this for some reason. It's just they either restart a few seconds earlier so that you can retry from the moment before you failed, or they just make it basically impossible for you to fail. And
What that
Right,
reminds
and
me
if
of
you
is like a stealth game
yeah,
has that kind of scenario. That's how stealth games are designed.
yeah,
I mean, they're not narrative.
right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
well,
That's how I play Dishonored. I sneak around until someone sees me, at which point I just pull out my knife and start hacking.
Yeah.
just like you do in real life. But I mean, like, well, I remember playing SWAT 4 with a buddy of mine who's a cop, right? And we went in and we're doing all these things, and like some old lady stumbles out of a closet or whatever, and I, not being well trained and being bloodthirsty, I just shot her, right. Like I just absolutely unloaded on this old lady,
Right.
and it goes like like it was like innocent killed, abort mission. I'm like, abort mission? We're supposed to be rescuing a hostage from like a serial killer. And you're saying just because I shot an old lady, we're just going to go, well, fuck the hostage. Like, yeah, of course, Suzanne, but gee whiz, like I just
She's
shot an old
already
lady.
dead.
Like,
Yeah.
we can't possibly keep going.
Yeah.
Like, and he was just my friend, he was just like, that's not how the police work.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
of course,
clearly
like,
not.
yeah, exactly. They shoot somebody and then they just go on shooting people
Yeah.
until So
Yeah, you
no,
don't
it
even
was
get in trouble for it.
right, exactly. Well, it's qualified immunity, right? Like
Yeah.
Right.
So so even in a game that wasn't like a game, that was just theoretically a simulation, which is the kind of
I
thing
think
I love.
I think the
What
reason it didn't fail you is because
Uh-oh.
Lost.
Well, see, he was about to say something controversial.
Yeah.
That end of the house is just gone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna walk down there. There's just gonna be a big smoldering pit.
No controversy.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, whatever Cleveland was gonna say, I'm sure he was gonna agree with me and enthusiastically endorse my opinion.
Absolutely.
But it's just a strange. It's just weird in a simulation that they would just go simulation over. I mean, like in the Kobayashi Maru, or I mean, I don't understand that impulse, but I think you've analyzed it correctly. It's an unwillingness to fail, which
Right.
is something like, I mean, how many times in an MFA student's work have you ever seen a character make a mistake?
Yeah, they
Right?
don't.
They don't. They don't ever make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if
Right,
they
they
make a
don't-
mistake, then they don't seem realistic, which is like so counterintuitive and weird, right?
Bizarre, yeah. I mean, it's completely backward.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so this weird infallibility somehow,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a real problem, of course, because the one thing we know about ourselves, if we're even minimally honest about our own natures, is how fallible we are.
Right.
Right? Now, some of us are able to just externalize that and put it on other people, right? And just go around constantly enraged that all you dummies don't know what the hell you're doing. But I mean, unless you're actively engaged in some real like psychological damage to yourself, yeah, you're always acknowledging how fallible you are,
Right.
and that failure is failure's a requisite, right?
Yeah. Well, it's
But you're. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
so the what this makes me think of is Planescape Torment. So like in Planescape, which is widely considered like one of the best written games ever, that what I was often amazed by is that they just put so much work into the dialogue, into talking to people, that like I think I might have used this example before, but at some point in the game, I walk into a bar and I start talking to some older woman at the bar, right? And
As one does.
as one does. And I was looking for directions because I genuinely didn't know where to go. Like I was just like, I walked in, she seemed nice, I started talking to her, and she started telling me this story about where she works. And at any moment, I could have been an asshole, and said, I'm not really interested in any of that. I'm looking for directions. Like there was, 8 dialogue options, and each one had their own separate sub options and all of these crazy things. And there were multiple sentences which ultimately said the same thing, but in different ways. Right. And so it was a great deal of care that went into how you could interact with the world. And so I found it super interesting because I ended up just pissing her off on accident. Like I said something about her job that like I was like, well, that seems like, kind of nasty work. And she was like, well, what the fuck do you know? And then she wouldn't talk to me anymore. And it was a
Are you
failure.
sure we're not just talking about a really, bad Tinder date you had?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's that too. But
I mean,
but
it sounds like an actual date. Like I'm feeling a lot of like waves of anxiety and grief coming from you.
It
right.
was Suzanne's last date before Pinckney shot her to death.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Suzanne, who's my mom's name. Uh, so, so
It makes it so much better.
yeah, right. And so but that's the kind of the interesting thing is that I entered it into a failure state with that character, but it didn't reload the game. It didn't put me back to the beginning of the conversation so that I could do it right this time. You know what I mean? It was just now that avenue's closed and I have to go and find a new avenue, which is verisimilitude.
Right. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and right,
Elastic failure. That's a great term. I'm going to start using that in my classes.
it's great. It's
Right.
yeah, Tynan. He's so
It really feels
but,
like
but
a
it's like Beth, right? When Beth screws up and and knocks over the rack that has the cookie package on it and stuff like that. But see, we also buy her decision because when she looks at the cookie, right? Do you remember that passage, Sarah, about the cookie? I mean, it's like it becomes the platonically perfect cookie, right? I mean, it glows. It's like calling her name. She
Yeah.
cannot refuse this cookie.
Well,
And
it does talk to her. It says, like,
yeah,
what are you doing? Like, don't leave me behind.
right. So I mean, she has a good reason to go after, from her point of view, to go after the cookie and to fail. But it is a lasting failure, and that's really every scene in literature ends in failure,
right.
right? Because if it ended in success, the story would end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so failure is really at the heart of literature.
Right.
Yeah, it's like at the heart of narrative and story, because once you succeed, you stop.
Yeah. Yeah, there's really
Yeah.
only one
And the
successful battle.
Right. And like the refusal of the call only results in a positive response to the call after it fails, right? After it turns out that the refusal of the call was in fact a failed strategy and you don't have the place to go back to that you thought you did,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? You don't refuse the call and then just kind of go, oh, now that I think about it, that old guy kind of made sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You proceed on in that elastic failure until you reach a point where your failure is no longer deniable, and then you realize the only other path open to you is accepting the call.
Right, right. Well, and then as you go on the hero's journey, it's really just scene after scene of either running away from the thing that you're not ready to fight yet, or failing to fight the thing that you're trying to fight, until eventually the ally comes in and says, "You know what you're doing wrong? This." And then the protagonist goes, "You're right. I am doing that wrong." And then they know how to
Right.
do the one battle correctly, and then they win. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the narrative. That's the hero's journey. And so
Right, and that's why it's so weird when, like, you watch Star Wars, you watch A New Hope, and then it's like, well, they built another goddamn Death Star, right? And you're like, no, that's not how this works. It needs to be a new problem, right?
Right.
It needs to be, you can't just repeat the same beats.
yeah.
And they did a good job with growing up the Luke Skywalker character, and like, I mean, he really does have an interesting journey through those 3 films. But facing the same battle again is just a failure of imagination.
Right.
Whoa.
Yep. It's a very interesting thing. And I guess, I mean, we're already at time, but if we wanted to, I guess we could try to lead into the sequel discussion. Or maybe some closing thoughts from Matt, because since he was the one that brought up the whole.
Yeah,
No,
and
I mean this was an excellent conversation just about morality systems that spun out and connecting up to literature and novels. I'm thrilled. I think this was a great episode.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's very
I mean,
interesting.
I learn a lot from these kinds of conversations, and anytime I get a chance to talk about, say, Catastrophe, I'm pretty happy. I love that novel, and we
Oh,
should talk about. Well, it's Salt Lake City too. We should, that comes into this,
Yeah,
right? Like you've got a lot
Yeah.
of characters who, I mean, you're in my opinion most lovable character is like a pimp.
right.
I mean, I don't know if a woman can be a pimp. I don't know what the word is, a madam
Yeah,
or something
right. I
like that.
guess.
Like,
Yeah.
Exactly.
like yeah, but that's great. Or like the thing I'm working on now, which is called Rise and Slaughter. It's about a group of people who, basically any situation they enter, they finish it by destroying the situation,
Right.
right? So like any problem they encounter, the only solution they have is violence,
right.
right? And so everything becomes violence. Everything becomes a battle. Everything becomes a slaughter. And um, and not like this, right? Like here, everything's a battle, everything's a slaughter, but you're not horrified by it, right? You're
Right.
not
no,
like,
I mean
you know,
specifically robots.
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So, but this is where, like, I mean, even when they're like among friends, the imp of the perverse, they get drunk enough that they decide, that their friends have shit that they want, and they're gonna, they need it, and their friends won't give it to them, and so they just kill everyone.
Right.
I've
Um,
been I've been playing the Yakuza games lately, and in that
Mhm.
Well, that's a beautiful
you're
example.
you're just a criminal. You're just
Yeah.
beating the shit out of random people on the street, and I mean, they say that the meme is that Kiryu doesn't kill people, but like it's actually kind of that was from a mistranslated interview. You kill people.
Yeah.
Like you are a
Well, because
Yakuza. You are a
yeah,
criminal.
A Yakuza game where you didn't kill people would be a fake Yakuza game,
Yeah.
right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah, and
it'd
like
be like
Kiryu's
if you're like, oh, Tony Soprano didn't really kill anyone,
Yeah.
yeah,
or like,
and
oh, Walter White didn't really kill anyone. He sure as hell did.
like Kiryu is a nice guy. He's a good father and stuff, but he's still like a criminal. He still
Yeah,
kills
well,
people.
exactly. I'm a good father, but I'm still a criminal.
Well, I mean, this is bullshit anyway. Like the whole thing with fucking Batman. Like he's like, oh, Batman doesn't kill people. I'm like, yeah, but he paralyzes them and he fucking, he
Right.
breaks their legs and fucking throws them off buildings and shit. Like, is that
I wouldn't
better?
be caught by a single rope. You're telling me your back's not broken after that?
It's like, what? He's a good guy? That's what you're saying? He's a good
Right.
guy?
Well, exactly. And what he actually is, and where the best incarnations of him realize he is he's a self righteous prick.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
Right?
he's a billionaire, so
Well, but see, that's the thing. Like in the first movie, or the first of the Nolan movies, right? He's out, hunting people down or whatever. Or there's a guy you think is Batman, but it's just like a fat guy with a shotgun, wearing kind of a foam rubber Batman suit
Yeah.
and hockey pads, and he runs into the real Batman. The real Batman goes, go home. And the guy's like, well, how am I different from what you're doing? Which is a great question.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the way Batman dismisses it is, I'm not just wearing hockey pads. And I'm like, so what you mean is you're rich enough to afford anti-ballistic armor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And which of you is braver then? I mean, and which of you
For
is
real.
this guy's out defending
Right.
his neighborhood in hockey pads,
Yeah.
right?
No, and
then
I
you're
I
going,
just
you have no right.
rewatched that movie, and that scene stuck out to me. Dark Knight has not aged very well. But then the
No, I think it has.
consequence of the universe, instead of what you're saying, which is the interesting dynamic, the consequence of the universe is the Joker kidnaps that same dude in hockey pads and kills him as his first victim, saying that no, you shouldn't imitate Batman. He's some kind of I mean, platonic, right, example of this force that the Joker wants to fight against, when the more interesting story out of that character is just this like schmo dude
Yeah. I was about to
who's
say the
trying to
same
go toe
thing.
to toe.
I would
Yeah.
be so much more into a book about a dude wearing hockey pads and a fake rubber mask with a fucking shotgun trying to
Well, and
defend his
that's why I
neighborhood.
love like Kick Ass, the character of Big
Yep.
Daddy and Hit Girl.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's awesome. Or or the movie Super with
Yep.
Rainn Wilson, where he like wears underwear and carries around a pipe wrench and hits the
Still
wrong
think
people with the
Super's
pipe wrench.
incredible. Yep. Its
Yeah,
portrayal of violence is so spot on.
yeah.
So
I
spot
mean,
on.
and it's shocking. Like that
It
movie
is.
has shocking. I will not spoil, but it
Hmm.
has shocking moments where you're like, oh, this is like I've been wrong to be laughing at this.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this is a story of tragic mental illness. And
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really funny up until it had very predictable consequences.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
love those
Right?
moments.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. No, and that's the thing. Like, I've never played a game where I felt implicated, right? I've never played a
Yeah.
game where at the end I was like, oh my God, I'm like, I am legend,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, this whole time I've been killing these people, and it turns out they're the humans and I'm the monster.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
that's sort
Yeah.
of what Spec Ops: The Line tried to do, but it kind of fails at it because it's like kill these guys and then you can't continue and then you kill the guys and it's like you're a bastard for killing those guys and it's like well you told me to.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
the
Yeah.
problem, right?
It is a
It's like
problem.
the games take it literally, like this is your mission, and and even like even James Bond, even in the original novels, felt bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And had some questions like, like I killed way more people than my enemies did.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so not that I want like morose, but I love the idea that of playing a game where I am just enthusiastically wiping out my enemies, and then I find out like, oh no,
Yeah.
right? Like
It
I'm
actually was a
implicated.
bad choice. Yeah.
Right.
No.
I thought I was righteous, and I'm actually a monster.
Yeah, and that's what I think the only game that really truly successfully, well, two, there's Planescape and there's Disco. And I think Disco was the one game that really,
Yeah.
I remember when I,
Disco gets as close as I've ever seen.
yeah, where I remember talking to Klasia or Anya Disco Dancer, and I accidentally may have implied that she was raped. And it was just through my own dialogue choices. And Dylan felt guilty, not
Yeah.
the character. Dylan felt guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
No,
was
that's
brutal. I mean, it's a brutal scene in that game.
Well, and
that's
before
sweet.
we leave off, I'm hitting a good juncture here, the end of this
Okay.
mission. So a former crew member, Tali, one of her a member of her race, was on this planet. He's suffering mental trauma, and your organization wants to either take him for questioning. That's the renegade option, right? It's down at the bottom. Up at the top, he can go with her, or you can invite her to join you, a former crewmate. And ideally, right, I would like her to join me. She's very, very, very talented, very useful crew member. Um, but it sets up this binary, and after our conversation here, this just feels so restrictive and so regressive
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and predictable. Right? There's no room for role playing, and I could think of 10 different permutations of a character motivated decision that you pick, which leads the character automatically to the conclusion of, okay, the, you can take them with you or they're coming with us. There's no role playing here.
Yeah.
You're just choosing whether or not you're going to be a prick to this person or you're going to side with your new friends. Like,
Right.
that's not interesting.
Well, it's just not sufficiently motivated, right? Like you as
Sure.
Shepard you don't give a shit as the player, like why you're even here. You don't have any.
Yeah.
It,
No, it's all metagaming. I've been pulled along by Cerberus, and my first instinct, I would love to leave this organization and join up with this crewmate and lead the charge against the antagonist with them at my back, not this organization that doesn't care about me.
yeah. Right.
Yeah. Human loyalty. Like what I want to play is a game that plays out like Firefly.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where you're like, because think about it, they make choices against interest all the time
Mm-hmm.
in that show.
Yeah.
And and you love them for it, and they all come together and they decide that they want to be together. Their loyalty is to each other. If you were on that crew, your loyalty would be to them, as flawed and as mistaken and as bedeviled by the imps of the perverse as they are.
Yeah.
Right? That would be, but I've never run across that. I mean, I've run across it in multiplayer games like Star Trek Bridge Crew, right? You're just like, oh, that guy's always playing ops as an idiot, but I'm kind of glad that I like him, like he's funny.
Yeah.
He's not a wash or whatever. But it's very hard to. It seems very hard to imbue games with that, but it can't be, right? Because it's not. You can do it in novels, and anything you can do in a novel or a film or a television show, you could do in a game.
Right. I mean, all of these choices are available in The Witcher 3, right? It's very similar in its structure, but Witcher 3 does a very good job of actually making you consider why you're doing the things you're doing.
So
Um,
you really inhabit the Witcher,
yeah. Hmm.
right? You're not just Dylan manipulating the Witcher.
Right, yeah. You inhabit The
Okay.
Witcher, and The Witcher just does a better job of setting it up. Like, so Lucky Archer said, Commander Shepard is very much a set protagonist, but you only get to choose either good or bad cop, right? And in The Witcher, there is the way that they set up the world is that there's no such thing as good and bad cop. That's how they set up the world. And so
Yeah.
every interaction within the world in which there is no good or bad cop is just innately more interesting. Um, because there is no right or wrong. I mean, there is right and wrong, but there's to varying degrees of right and wrong, and how much right and to whom and for why, and the thing goes for wrong. And so it's just there's so much more work that needs to be done on the front end of developing these types of worlds, so that that's what I did with disc jockey. I made it really really small, and I knew that I needed to have a world that made sense within the confines of dialogue bullets, right? So everybody's impatient with you, everybody's trying to take up as much of your time as possible, and that's how you can build that tension from the outset, rather than from like, well, they'll care because we told them to care. um
Right. Yep.
And I think something you said earlier, Dylan, that it's not allowing these options is motivated by fear. I think that's very much true of the Mass Effect series.
right.
Just thinking back to controversies surrounding the game about its portrayal of sex, violence, decision making, there was so much fear as a product, as an entertainment product,
Yeah.
that restricted the writers. And you hear about it in every interview you look at, of how they had to change things, how they feel like they couldn't do enough, and etc. And
Well, when
yeah,
Neophyte is an indie game publisher,
Haha.
we're gonna take on. Yeah, this is we can finish here maybe. Is we're gonna take on the kinds of games that cause controversy and that the big boys wouldn't be able to publish because of their fear.
Sing
Because we don't.
Catastrophe the game.
Oh
oh,
my god.
I'm totally down with that. That would make me very very happy. And Salt Lake City, it almost is a game at this point.
I
Yeah,
mean, it has a game
You
in the
know,
it
universe.
and
has a
I
game.
want to, yeah, I want to have a section where you play Alkion.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be brilliant. Well, Rise and Slaughter,
when
I mean, Rise and Slaughter is described almost like a game. You know what I
well, it
mean?
is, yeah, no, it feels like that. It's a game in vignettes. The problem is that it's so hard to make the content
Hmm.
that the idea of making branching narratives for it is just like it's just mind-boggling.
Right.
I'm having a hard enough time wrapping my mind around making enough three 8K 360 stereoscopic images
Right.
to actually just tell the one story.
Yeah, right, right.
But if that's okay, maybe I can hire other people and I can start to do it the way I want to do it. But
Hmm.
but no, I would love for it to be a game.
Yeah.
Exactly. That you're just this tinderbox of a human being. And you're waiting for someone to give you an excuse.
Right.
Uh,
It's like Pinckney's innate fantasy.
or just my life.
Well, but then this is it too. I mean, we can end after, but like this is the frustrating thing about video game protagonists in general, is that they're not very flawed. They're just not a very
Yeah, they're
like
not
heroes and
interesting.
stories are flawed as
Yeah,
fuck, and that's what
yeah.
makes them cool.
I mean, Charlie Burger, the video game.
Oh my
Oh
god.
my god.
That
I
you're
need that.
you're this weird half crippled Russian psychopath in a tiny town in 1930s Southern Illinois, and you've got machine guns.
Yeah.
but you're also, like really popular and charismatic, and I mean, like that's an interesting character, and everybody around him's interesting. Like anybody whose name, their nicknames are, what were some of their nicknames? I mean, they were, Izzy the Jew,
Izzy the
uh,
Jew, High Pockets McQuay,
Eye Pockets. That's right, exactly. The blonde bombshell.
Blonde
You know,
Bombshell, yeah.
yeah. Like I mean, that would be any of those would be fun characters to play or meet
Right.
You can
in a
make
game.
a game where you can pick any of those characters and
I
have
would play the
have it.
blonde bombshell all the time. I love the blonde bombshell. She cracks me up.
And just to be clear, we're referring to a what was the book called? It's a book
It's
that
called
we.
a Knight of Another Sort.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
A Knight.
And
It's an audiobook narrated by the Ballard, who shall not be mentioned.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
if you want to go listen to that, actually, we have a podcast going on called Blanket Fort Radio Theater. And if you want to go listen to the Charlie Berger story and see what we're talking about as it and imagine that in game form, go check that out. But
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we do a lot of stuff, man. The various forms of the Neophyte Studios Network produces a lot of content.
Yeah. Right.
We need to bring it all under this roof.
Yeah.
That's my thing. And like we need to sit down with the Earworm Labs people and find out what the hell they're doing with the money I gave them, and bring them in. Like that just needs to become, because I don't know that they're doing anything, and if we're gonna support it, it has to produce content for this network.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Very good. Well, good conversation.
Good stream.
This was enjoyable.
Yeah.
Good stream. Yeah.
Well, do we want to do outros for all of us, or do we
Sure.
want to just say,
No, let's do a little advertising. We provided
good, all
content.
right.
Yeah.
Now
Well,
let's
first,
advertise
as
some shit.
always, we have myself, Pinckney, and Dylan.
Uh-huh.
Dylan's a graduate of the MFA program here in Southern Illinois University.
Yep.
You're giving me a look. Is there
No. I was thinking of
advice
something
that's
else.
given?
I was thinking of
Okay.
something else. I was thinking of something else.
Oh,
Sorry.
his wonderful piece of fiction and his game around is itch.io. Dylan.davis is the extension, right?
Yeah, I can't get into that account anymore.
Ooh.
I got locked
Well,
out.
if you wanted to see and play Disc Jockey, which is a wonderful dialogue system, and
Yeah, that addresses a lot of the things we were talking about.
Yeah.
right, it's an amazing, amazing idea, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the games Dylan makes in the future. So you can check his stuff out there. Pinckney is a well-established fiction author. Where can we find some of your stuff? Because I don't even know anymore.
Well, I've got 3 books of short stories and a novel, and you should look under my name and Big Old Bear on
Amazon.
Amazon, and it should show up.
Yep.
Buy Miracle Boy. That's my most recent.
I would
collection
recommend
story.
getting the Audible audiobook of Miracle Boy. I listened to that.
Oh, I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually recorded that.
Yeah, I know.
Never listened to it though.
You should
Yeah.
imagine my surprise when I was on a plane and I downloaded the book expecting Not You. And then I turned on the audiobook and listened to Miracle Boy. And I was like, oh shit, I can't get away from him. Even on a fucking plane.
Oh my god, international waters.
Now with us as well, another consistent, we have Cleveland Benedict, an undergraduate here at SIU, and our esteemed guest Sarah Gillick,
Hello.
who has her book Saint Catastrophe, which we have not talked up enough, available through Amazon, right?
Yes, Amazon.
Everywhere that fine books are sold, and the podcast Saints and Witches.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
just edited an episode today. Came straight from Audacity.
What is the title? Because you all always have good titles. for
The
your
title
episodes.
of episode 31, which comes out tomorrow, is called A Healthy Gaggle of Nuns.
And what do you
What's it?
do on Saints and Witches? What do you talk
So
about?
it's the podcast I co-host with Liz Engelmeyer, who is another graduate of the MFA program. I'm a Catholic, she's a witch, so every episode I tell her a story about a saint and she tells me a story about a witch.
That's dope.
Wonderful.
And
And
then,
where
what are
can
some
you
of your
listen?
other titles? Can you remember any other titles? Because they're
Uh,
always provocative and interesting.
the one that always comes to mind right away is the episode that was titled Semen Loopholes, which where the title comes from is there was this French priest who was like a terrible person in the 17th century, and like
Like a lot
he
of 17th century French priests.
true,
Terrible
very
people.
true, as we've seen on the podcast. And there was this whole thing where he, during his stated that like his semen was magical and would go out from his cell and like impregnate all the nuns in the convent.
Mm.
Oh, isn't that wholesome?
I know, it's so fun.
Very cool.
And where does it stream?
Anywhere.
Anywhere.
Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher.
Yep.
Anywhere.
Fantastic.
Very cool. Also, final announcement: 7 days from today, Game Jam 4 starts.
Fantastic. Do we have a theme that's emerged?
We just about. It's looking like camping trip is going to be the theme.
Oh, that's
very
great.
cool.
I put it up as a
Excellent.
vote, and
And
Yeah.
if you guys haven't played the game jams, you can look back on Twitch on itch.io at the narrative game jams we've done.
Yeah.
There's been some heavy
holy
hitters that have
shit,
emerged.
so many
Yeah,
fucking good games.
Good games.
And on our YouTube, where we archive every stream for VOD, you can watch our playthrough of those games, our commentary.
Yeah.
And these are things that have emerged from our community, our international community of fans.
Yep.
And I'm just thrilled to see what you guys produce.
And as a reward for the people who came here today, I'm ready to announce the restriction for the game jam.
Okay.
Are
Here
you
we
ready?
go.
I've been working on this for a while.
you
So
got?
this is irrelevant of the theme, but the restriction for the next game jam, for game jam number 4, it's the first restriction we've ever done. It is a mechanic restriction. Your game must include an element of randomness. It must include an element of randomness. However,
Great.
That can be
Like life.
anything.
Like
Mhm.
life itself.
Yep. So if it ends up being camping trip, that means it has to have some type of random thing that happens, and not necessarily in the story, but just some type of random mechanic.
Great.
Yep.
And do we know what the show is going to be next week? A week from today? Are we doing the Latin game?
No, we're gonna actually, that Latin game is gonna be July 7th. I meant
Okay.
to tell you about that. Yeah,
July 7th. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
July 7th.
All right. Well, so it'll be a grab bag next week.
Well, I did buy and download the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of Middle Earth. I would
Ooh.
love for us to.
Great. Can we talk more largely about like the relationship between games and literature and films and
Yeah.
stuff like that? Like
I want
games
to
as-
split our
as
attention
adaptation.
between that and what they have called the Nemesis system. So if you guys got time.
Oh yeah, no,
the Nemesis
that's
system.
yeah. But
Yeah.
but the idea of games as canon,
Yeah.
right,
Right.
is a really cool idea.
Which we have
Yeah.
Dylan, who has explicitly done that, and we have a Tolkien expert, at least one.
Yep.
Pinckney, do you consider yourself a Tolkien expert?
Who? Me?
You, yeah, you.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Sarah. Sarah's more of an expert than I am.
That precedes her reputation.
I would call myself an enthusiast, but Sarah is an expert on the plants.
Ah.
That's true. I'm like a Middle Earth botanist, I would
I
say.
probably know some like obscure facts.
Well, there we go. So we cover the whole gambit. I've
No,
only seen the movies.
perfect.
Dylan's done the
extra
games of
points
literature.
if you come as a character from Lord of the Rings.
We've got to do Mordor. I'm so interested to talk, because I think that game does not get a certain thing right about Tolkien. And I watched some videos about it, so like my theory is a little bit informed, but it doesn't get the spirit of Tolkien correct, and I'm very excited to talk about that as
That's
canon.
what I've heard. That
Okay.
is very much what I've heard. I'm looking forward to that. I'll have to decide. I've heard mixed reviews, and maybe people in the chat will know that Shadow of War, it's worth just skipping over the first game.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a brilliant game,
so,
though.
Right, but the sequel, from what I've heard, just does it better.
Yeah.
So then we'll plan Shadow of War next week.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Great.
Thanks for
Look
everybody.
forward to it. See you.
Goodbye to everybody.
Bye.
So I'm going to respond to, while everybody's kind of filing out, I'm going to respond to some chat messages. It's unbelievable that they made a movie starring the guy who played Patrick Bateman, and it turned out so boring. Let's see. That's from Squishy Puff Dave. Lucky Archer. Undertale does that to a certain degree. I'm assuming that it was the kind of choice and consequence. You guys can go. I'm just responding to messages.
I want to stick around for this.
I'd like to stick around to answer some just in case.
Yeah. So, but Pinckney and Sarah, you're free to go if you need to go somewhere.
Okay, I'm gonna bolt.
All right.
Cool.
Sarah's already gone. You could tell.
Oh yeah.
Sure, I'm trying.
I think you can just click the. Yeah, there you go. Okay, she's got it. All right. So Undertale does that to a certain degree. I'm assuming that means the choice and consequence aspect, where you can be led to make a wrong choice.
Right, and Undertale, not to eat up much time, but like it offers really grounded decisions.
Yeah.
And doesn't explicitly state where they lie on the morality spectrum.
Yeah.
It's only when people metagame it later, but it does such a good job of really throwing you in the world to respond organically to stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I think it did a really great job with that.
It might even obfuscate like fully its morality system. Like it doesn't even like tell you it's there until the end.
Right.
If I'm correct.
Yeah, I don't remember there being a sense of like indication. I really do think that that's like the big problem. Like you can't indicate, and you can still you can have clearly good choices, right? I don't think that you can even avoid not having good choices in dialogue.
But it can't be blue and red, and it can't be Renegade on bottom and Paragon up top.
Yeah, the hard part.
If you're gonna do that, I think Shin Megami Tensei 4 did that, where to get the neutral ending, you have to answer dialogue, answer alternating dialogue, but but they'll sometimes switch up with chaos on the top and law on the bottom, and law on the top and chaos on the bottom.
Right. Yeah. Because that's just really all you need. You just need to make sure, I think the audience just needs to know the difference between moving the conversation along. Actually, I take that back. I don't even think that an audience, I think Cyberpunk actually made a mistake by saying that yellow moves the story and blue is extra info. I don't think that they should have done that. I think that to make a better dialogue system, you really just need to pull back on some information, but make sure that the player has enough information that they know what they're saying. Because like in The Witcher 2, for example, in The Witcher 2, the famous example is where you say I disagree, and then Geralt actually says, "Go fuck yourself, you goddamn asshole," and you're like, "Wow, that is not what I meant."
That's what it feels like in every Mass Effect decision.
Yeah, and that's not good. That's bad with
Fallout 4 dialogue tree.
Right.
Oh, Fallout 4 dialogue tree is a fucking nightmare.
And we didn't even talk about SMT. I'm a huge fan.
Dude, I love
the
SMT
idea
too.
of order and chaos, of status quo and something new as your morality system.
Have you played the remaster of Nocturne yet?
No, I played some Nocturne back in the day, but I have not picked up the sequel because I bought too many games all the time.
Well, the remaster came out.
Yeah.
I would love, you and I should do something. I'll buy it and do it, because if you and I ever have a week alone, I would love to do that, because I love Shin Megami Tensei.
And we're switching the shows around, so the Wednesday stream is going to be a little less populated in the future and more focused on just playing games, talking about games for an extended period of time. That's on the list, without a doubt.
Well, I think that that's just the perfect thing for the Wednesday show, right? Like if if you were Cleveland and we're like, oh god, I'd be so sick to play like Persona or Shin Megami Tensei or one of those games, it'd be dope. And then you could do like a long form 2-hour stream where you really dig into the meat, And
I would love to do that, because I love a lot of the high concept stuff of the series too.
Yeah.
And so I would love to talk. I would love to talk about that.
No, without a doubt, that's awesome. I'm totally.
All right, you and I, let's talk. Let's plan this sometime then.
Yeah. Cool.
Will do.
All right, so I think we basically let's see. Nocturne is such a great game, says Lucky Archer. I'm assuming that's a Shin Megami Tensei something or other. I don't know it very well. Although I did start playing Persona 4, and
Ooh, good call.
And I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. I needed to learn.
Yeah, how many hours in are you?
Probably like 7.
So you're about halfway through the intro.
Yeah, about yeah. I'm like, because I know that like most Persona games have like that first castle, and
15 to 20 hours
yeah,
before the game gets going.
and fucking, I've been trying to get through that castle, and it just takes a long time. It just takes a long ass time, but I really like it. I went into thinking that I was going to hate that game, and I came out of it shocked at how much I like it, which I thought
Well,
was kind of
that
cool.
and Yakuza, I always point to are the two games that turn people into anime fans.
Right.
Yakuza is just iconic. I have been
Honestly.
playing them for the past week, and it is phenomenal.
Yeah, but it's really cool. It's really cool stuff. My eyes are being opened a little bit. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and stop streaming now. So
Yep, that wraps it up.
have a good day, everybody, and goodbye to you.
Later.